Okay, can you say your name, please?
Sure. Nora Baldner, Norabaldner.
Okay, and Miss Baldner, you worked in broadcast communication for how long?
I did for 23 years.
23 years. And can you tell us a little bit about the different jobs that you held in
Oh
the
boy.
23 years?
Well, if you're familiar with how a television newsroom works, I did practically every job in there except sports.
Mm-hmm.
And I did weather for one day, and then they said never again because I didn't really, the gal that was supposed to do weather called in sick, and we were kind of scrambling, and so I kind of read the maps, and I was all over the place, and so I did not pursue a weather career. But in my experience, I have reported, I've been an anchor, I've produced, I've been assignment editor, I've been executive producer, I've been managing editor, and news director.
Okay, and so you've obviously had a whole bunch of different jobs. Tell us about, maybe some skills that people may not think about right off the cusp. Obviously, you've got to be able to report and research and do stuff like that, but maybe something that goes a little more understated that in your
Sure.
experience throughout all those jobs you would want someone to know.
It is interesting because a couple of duties changed every time I changed jobs, but at the heart of the matter, journalism is journalism. So in each job, the end result was good journalistic content. So it was either I was reading it if I was an anchor, I was writing it if I was a reporter, I was organizing it in some fashion if I was a producer. I was coming up with the ideas or creating the content as an assignment editor. And then once you get beyond that level and you're into either executive producer or news director, then you start to get more administrative duties, and you're worrying about budgets instead of worrying about interviews, which is kind of hard to if your heart is with creating the product and doing the interviews and the reporting. Once you get into management, it's not that much fun anymore. But so in all of those jobs, skills that come with that, first and simple, you have to start with a sense of curiosity. And if you have that, if you have an innate wanting to know how things work, wanting to talk to people, wanting to figure out what are they hiding, what's behind that story, how did that exactly work, what did the city council do, and how does that affect my pocketbook, am I going to have to pay more taxes? If there's an innate sense of curiosity, then the skills you need are being able to ask questions, being able to write down notes and understand what the person is trying to tell you, being able to compile that information in a very understandable and clear way, which is more difficult than it sounds. In order to write a good news story, you really have to be able to think clearly and kind of in order, so that you're not in one paragraph someone is dead and the next paragraph they're alive and then the third paragraph they're dead again. You really have to have a sense of organization. So there's two skill sets. There's really the content where you're either reporting or writing or putting it in a certain order, and then there's the practical skill set. Can you run a camera? Can you read a teleprompter? Can you operate Microsoft Word? Or can you operate software that is proprietary to the industry? So there's a lot of computer programs that you really don't use unless you're in the industry.
Okay, and since you mentioned stuff about the computers and everything that's happening in the industry, tell us about broadcast. Is obviously, I would say maybe the bigger thing with that field is how dynamic it is, especially you've been in 23 years. I can only imagine where you started and where you ended with where you get information from, how you get that information, the rate at which you get that information. So if you could talk about how quickly the field is changing, where it's going, and what benefits and risks there are with that.
I have a funny story to tell you. So I started working in 1989 and in Quincy, and I had worked 2 years previously in Columbia. But when I started here, I don't remember the year, but we were on typewriters, and you used to have the scripts would come in 5-ply sheets, because you would put the thing in the typewriter, and you'd have to send a copy to 5 different people, so they were very thick scripts. So we started off on that, and I was in the newsroom during the transition of bringing in the computer, and it was as I look back now, it was pretty funny because everyone was, tied to that typewriter, and they did not want to go on the computer. They were very nervous about it. But progress is progress, so all the computers got installed, all of the typewriters got taken out, everyone was, getting trained and pretty comfortable on computers. Well, an employee's child came in and started messing around with someone's computer. We didn't know really what was going on, but what had happened is the child inadvertently set it up so that something kept saving automatically, which filled up the storage on the system. And so Saturday night at about 9:40, the whole system crashed, and the show is at 10 o'clock that night. And so we were scrambling to find typewriters because we had to get it on some type of script for the directors and the producers, etc. We had to break through a glass door to get into the business office because we saw one computer in the corner, one typewriter in the corner. We were like, we need that typewriter. No one was around. It was after hours. So the transition, while it can be painful in those situations, that was a big, huge transition from typewriters to computers. Ever since then, obviously it's just been updates, and the hardware hasn't changed, but the software, light years ahead of itself from back then. Something that's interesting that old-time journalists will tell you, the reporters these days have it so easy, all they have to do is get on Facebook to get a story. In my opinion, it's actually more difficult because back in the day, we'd get to work, we'd make a few phone calls, actually talk to real people, set up an interview, take the camera out, do the interview, come back, write up the story. And you really did have to cultivate relationships and cultivate sources so that people were giving you story ideas. Now, there's a bazillion story ideas on your phone. So you could scroll Facebook, you could scroll Twitter, you could look online, you could Google something and find a story idea. Why I think that's harder is now you have to really sift through all of the noise in order to get what's important and what stories you want to report. So what's timely, what's local, what's happening right now, that sort of thing. So watching the transition from back in the day where the technology was pretty crazy, to where it's very easy now, it's still, about talking to people, and it's still about connecting with someone you want to interview and tell their story. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Is that kind of what you asked?
Yeah. I mean, overall, it was just more, that was good. That's something I can really use because I'm just looking for, what's the bigger changes. And like you said, it's some people see that as more difficult. And like you said, it's almost like you can't pick because there's so many good options and you almost have an endless stream of information. So, no, I think I got basically.
In some ways, it's a lot easier now. In other ways, it's more difficult because, there's just so much coming at us and there's so much competition. We used to be the only source of news. When we came on at 6 o'clock or 10 o'clock, that's where you got your news, period. And now you get it from so many different sources. So it's a lot more competitive of a business. But that makes it more fun too, I think. So
one final question then. Obviously you had a lot of experience in Quincy, which is kind of a smaller, mid-sized market. If you have anything to compare to, say, a bigger market, Chicago, Kansas City, New York, Miami, I mean, I could go on, but what is in your experience, what is the difference, once again, pros and cons of being in a smaller market like Quincy or a bigger market?
Sure, and I can answer that because as news director I got to go travel quite extensively to other stations within our ownership group and conferences and things like that. And I actually did work in Springfield, which is medium-sized market. Quincy is a small market. I worked in Springfield, Illinois, which is medium-sized. The only difference is a larger audience. That's it. There's no difference from how you gather content, what content is, how you report it, who you talk to, and the deadlines, and how you get it to your audience. Other than that, it's just your audience size. Now, that's a generalization, because sometimes larger markets have more resources. They'll have a helicopter, they'll have 3 live trucks instead of 1 live truck. So, the toys are better in a bigger market.
Yeah.
You know, there's more equipment to play with. The pressure is more because you have so many more people watching. It's interesting because, you know, a lot of people come to the Quincy market or even Springfield, the Quad Cities, you know, Kirksville has a television station. This is a starter market. So you come here first, you know, mess up on your live shot a couple times, and then you get it right. And then in about 2 years, which is kind of the average, when people are very comfortable in what they're doing, because it's not normal to talk to a camera. You know, it's a skill set you really have to learn. And but once people get comfortable with that in a smaller market, then they tend to make a couple of different hops, and then their personal life gets involved, and that determines, you know, if they're going to stay in a market or not. But the difference is the content is the same. Quincy has a murder, Chicago has a murder, LA has a murder. You know, it's that same type of skill set that you're learning here, you can take to any other market size. So, but it's very, you know, a lot of people entering the business think that it's bad to start in a small market. They think they're not good enough to start in a big market, when the truth is everyone needs to start either small or medium, just to learn, just to get the bugs out, just to understand, you know, well, how do you cover this type of Adams County board meeting or something like that. So in my opinion, the difference is the bigger markets have maybe better facilities, a lot more pressure, bigger audiences. Smaller markets, you get your hands into everything and you do everything, and so you learn every part of the business before you get to the bigger markets.
Okay.
But there's definitely there's definitely a cycle of starting small and then going big. So.
All right. I think that just covers it. Those were kind of the major questions I had. So, thank you. I appreciate it for you taking the time. That's